Clara trudged up the stairs to her fourth-floor walk up each step, a monumental effort. The workday had been exhausting. Her legs were buzzing with fatigue and a dull ache throbbed in her temples from the endless stream of client calls. She wanted only one thing: to unlock her front door, kick off these cursed shoes, and collapse onto the sofa with a hot cup of tea. She could already imagine the blessed silence, the peace that awaited her on the other side of that door. That anticipation was the only thing that had sustained her during the final half-hour commute from the office. But when she slid the key into the lock, she sensed something was wrong. From inside, she could hear voices, laughter, and music. Clara froze, listening, her heart beginning to beat with a nervous rhythm. Had Ryan invited friends over without telling her? She opened the door slowly, and the sight that met her eyes left her paralyzed in the doorway, her mouth agape. Sprawled across her beloved sectional sofa, the one she'd spent 3 months saving for and an entire weekend picking out, were 3 young women. Ryan's sister Jessica, a tall, heavy-set, 25-year-old with dramatic over-the-top makeup, was in the middle, her feet propped up on the coffee table. Her friends flanked her as if they owned the place. Pizza boxes, empty soda bottles, and chip bags littered the table, and crumbs were scattered across the rug. The TV was blaring a reality show, where the participants shrieked and argued. "What is going on here?" Clara's voice was low, almost a whisper. She couldn't manage anything louder. Jessica turned her head lazily, not even bothering to move her feet from the table. An expression of mild surprise crossed her face, as if Clara were the intruder, not her. "Oh hey," she said with a shrug, her eyes immediately returning to her phone, her fingers tapping rapidly. The clacking of her painted nails against the screen was an irritating, monotonous sound. Clara felt something hot and furious begin to boil inside her, but she fought to remain calm. She didn't want to make a scene in front of strangers. "I'm asking what you're doing in my apartment," she repeated, taking a step forward, clutching her purse so tightly her knuckles turned white. "And how did you get in?" Jessica finally looked up from her phone, staring as if Clara had just asked the stupidest question in the world. "How'd I get in?" she parroted, her voice laced with poorly disguised irritation. "The normal way. I used my key and walked in. Mom gave me a spare. She said I could come over whenever I needed to. I had a horrible day and just needed to chill in a normal place, not the dump I live in." Clara felt the floor shift beneath her feet. Sharon, her mother-in-law, had given her daughter a key to their apartment without asking, without even mentioning it. She had simply treated their home as her own property. "Your mother gave you a key to my apartment," Clara said, slowly struggling to keep from shouting. "Did she forget that this isn't her house, that she has no right to hand out my keys to anyone?" Jessica snorted and rolled her eyes so dramatically that one of her friends let out a stifled giggle. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she said, waving a dismissive hand as if swatting a fly. "Mom said Ryan wouldn't mind. It's his house too, by the way. Besides, we're not bothering you. We'll be out of here in an hour or so." "Ryan wouldn't mind." Clara nearly choked on her indignation. Her cheeks flushed and she could feel the blood pounding in her temples. "And was anyone going to ask me if I minded strangers taking over my home, eating my food, trashing the place, and acting like they owned it?" The friends exchanged uncomfortable glances. One of them, sensing the tension had reached its peak, began to gather her things. Jessica rose from the sofa with a slow, theatrical movement, making it clear that this whole scene was an annoyance, and that she considered Clara a hysterical drama queen. "You know what, we'll just go," she said coolly, grabbing her purse and motioning to her friends. "I don't want to be where I'm not welcome. But just so you know, Ryan's going to hear about how you spoke to me. He's not going to like that you kicked his own sister out of his house." Clara stood in silence, clenching her teeth, watching as the 3 of them slowly put on their jackets, deliberately fixing their hair and shooting her meaningful glares. When the door finally slammed shut behind them, she sank onto the sofa, ignoring the crumbs and stains, and buried her face in her hands. She was trembling inside, a fire of insult and humiliation burning through her. How could this have happened? How dare Sharon give away a key to her home? And worse, what was Ryan thinking when his mother asked for it? He must have just handed it over without a thought for Clara, for her boundaries, for the personal space she didn't want to share with his relatives. Clara got up and began to clean up the mess. With every empty bottle and greasy pizza box she threw away, a cold fury grew inside her. She didn't know what she would say to Ryan when he got home, but one thing was clear: this couldn't continue. Her house, her space, her life, and no one, not even his mother, had the right to make decisions about it without her consent. As she washed the dishes the unwanted guests had left behind, she rehearsed the conversation with her husband. Her heart ached with anxiety because she already knew what he would say. He always defended his mother, always justified her actions, always told Clara she was being too sensitive, that she was overreacting, that Sharon only meant well. But where was the well-meaning in handing out keys to someone else's home, turning her sanctuary into a public rest stop? By the time Clara finished cleaning, it was dark. She sat in the kitchen with a cup of cold tea, waiting for Ryan, running through different versions of the conversation in her head. She felt betrayed, used, as if her opinion meant nothing in his family. The feeling was so bitter it made her want to cry, but she stubbornly blinked back the tears. She could cry later if she had to. Right now she needed to be strong and set the firm boundaries she now understood should have been established long ago. Ryan came home around 10 p.m. Clara heard him in the hallway whistling a tune, clearly happy and relaxed after a night out with his friends. She sat in the dimly lit kitchen, not having turned on the overhead light because the harsh glare hurt her eyes. She was just waiting, gathering her strength for the conversation to come. When he walked into the kitchen and flipped the switch, his smile vanished instantly. He saw her pale, tense face and knew something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked, shrugging off his jacket and draping it over a chair, his brow furrowed with concern. "You look like someone died." Clara slowly lifted her gaze to his, and there was so much pain in her eyes that Ryan took an involuntary step back. "When I came home from work today," she began, her voice low and trembling with contained emotion, "your sister was in our apartment with her friends. They were eating, drinking, watching TV. They left the place a wreck, and they acted like it was their own living room." Ryan blinked, clearly not understanding the problem. He shrugged with such casual indifference that something inside Clara shattered. "So, she's my sister. She probably just needed a place to hang out." He opened the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of water. A wave of anger so intense it was hard to breathe washed over Clara. "It's not about her being your sister," she said, forcing herself to speak slowly and clearly. "It's about her getting in with a key your mother gave her. Your mother handed out a key to my apartment without my permission, without even telling me. Do you understand what that means?" Ryan took a sip of water and leaned against the counter. His face showed a flicker of irritation, as if Clara were making a big deal out of nothing. "Clara, stop being so dramatic," he said, using that condescending tone he always adopted when he thought she was exaggerating. "Mom was just trying to help Jessica out. She had a tough day and needed a quiet place to relax. What's the big deal?" Clara shot up from the table so abruptly that the chair scraped against the floor, the sound echoing in the silent kitchen like a gunshot. "What's the big deal?" she repeated, her voice rising. "The big deal is that this is my house, Ryan. Mine. I bought this apartment with the inheritance my father left me. It's in my name, and I have the right to decide who comes in and who doesn't. Your mother had no right to hand out my keys to anyone, even your own sister." Ryan slammed the bottle down on the counter, splashing water onto the granite. His face darkened and his eyes narrowed. "Our house," he corrected her coldly. "I'm your husband, remember. That makes it our house, and my family has every right to be here." "Your family can be here when I invite them." Clara shot back, her hands clenched into fists. "But not when they let themselves in without me, throw parties, and act like they own the place. It's called respecting other people's boundaries, and your mother clearly has no idea what those are." Ryan took a step toward her, his jaw tight, his eyes flashing with anger. "Don't you dare talk about my mother like that," he snarled, pointing a finger at her. "She is the kindest person in the world. She's spent her whole life taking care of me and my sister. And if she gave her a key, it's because she had a good reason. Maybe she was worried about Jessica. Maybe she wanted her to have a safe place to go." Clara recoiled as if he'd struck her. Tears she had fought so hard to contain now welled in her eyes. "And did anyone think about me?" she asked, her voice dropping to a whisper, but one filled with so much pain that Ryan fell silent for a moment. "Did anyone think that maybe I wouldn't want other people going through my things, that I have a right to my own personal space, that I don't want my home turned into a bus station?" "They're not other people," Ryan said, running a hand over his face. His anger had subsided slightly, but the stubbornness remained. "They're my family. And if you can't accept my family, then maybe the problem is you, not them." Those words hurt Clara more than any shout. She looked at her husband, the man she'd lived with for 3 years, and suddenly understood that he wasn't listening to her. He didn't see her pain, he didn't understand why she was so upset. To him, his mother and sister were sacred, and she was just a difficult wife, making a scene for no reason. "I'm only asking you for one thing," she said, gathering her last reserves of strength to keep from screaming or crying. "Go to your mother's house tomorrow and get the key to our apartment back. Tell her she had no right to give it away. Tell her that if your sister wants to come over, she needs to call first and come when one of us is home. It's a reasonable request, Ryan. It's not an insult to your family." It's about respecting my boundaries. Ryan was silent, staring at the floor. His shoulders and fists were tense. Clara could see the conflict warring within him. He understood she was partly right, but he didn't want to go against his mother or look like an ungrateful son. Fine, he finally said, without looking up. I'll talk to her. But I'll be careful. I'm not going to accuse her of anything, because she didn't do anything wrong. I'll just say we need the key back. Clara nodded. She felt a sliver of relief but also a bitter aftertaste. He never said he understood her, feelings never apologized for what she'd been through. Thank you, she said quietly, and left the kitchen for the bedroom. That night they lay in bed with their backs to each other, an invisible wall of coldness and unspoken words between them. Clara stared into the darkness, feeling something important inside her slowly dying, the unconditional faith she once had in her husband. She'd hoped he would hold her, tell her everything would be okay, that he understood. But Ryan just breathed evenly, as if nothing had happened. 3 days passed, and Ryan didn't go to his mother's. Every time Clara asked, he had an excuse. He didn't have time, his mom was busy, he'd go tomorrow. And Clara knew he wasn't going to go. He was waiting for her to forget, for the situation to blow over, for them to pretend the conversation had never happened. But she didn't forget. With each passing day, a heavy bitter resentment built up inside her, slowly hardening into something else, a cold determination to protect what was hers. Ryan didn't get the key back. Clara realized this on the 4th day, when she came home from work early and once again found his sister in her apartment. This time Jessica was alone, engrossed in her laptop. When Clara walked in, she didn't even look up, just gave a lazy wave as if she were in her own room, and Clara was a nosy neighbor. You're here again, Clara said, hearing a weariness in her own voice, a resignation that sounded as if she'd already accepted that her home no longer belonged to her. They're doing renovations at my place, Jessica replied without looking up from the screen, her fingers typing away. The noise is unbearable. It's impossible to work. Mom said I can stay here until they're done, probably a couple of weeks, I guess. 2 weeks. Clara felt a knot of horror tighten in her stomach. 2 weeks of this invasion. 2 weeks of living with the feeling that her home was no longer her own. But she didn't argue. She knew it was useless. Jessica was convinced of her right to be there, convinced that Sharon made the decisions for everyone, and changing her mind was impossible. The next day Clara came home to find new groceries in her kitchen, spices she never bought, strange canned goods, boxes of brand cereal. Her own supplies had been pushed aside to make room for someone else's. The refrigerator had also been rearranged. Her yogurts were now on the bottom shelf, and massive Tupperware containers filled with beef stew and chili occupied the top. That evening, when Ryan returned, Clara asked him, trying to stay calm though she was boiling inside. Was your mother here today? She asked, gesturing toward the kitchen. Did she cook? Ryan nodded, his face lighting up as if it were wonderful news. Yeah, Mom stopped by and decided to cook for us for a few days, he said, opening the fridge and looking at the containers with relish. See how she takes care of us. You're always saying you're too tired to cook after work. She just wanted to help. Clara stood in silence as a wave of bitterness swelled inside her, making her want to scream. No one had asked if she wanted this help. No one considered that it might bother her to have someone else take over her kitchen, move her things, cook in her pots. Sharon had simply come in and done things her way, utterly convinced of her right to command this house. Did she get the key from your sister? Clara asked quietly. Of course, Ryan replied, not noticing anything wrong. How else would she have gotten in? The following days became a nightmare. Sharon came by almost daily, sometimes in the morning after Clara had left for work, sometimes in the afternoon, and a couple of times Clara came home to find her there. Her mother-in-law acted as if it were her own apartment. She mopped the floors, washed the curtains that Clara liked just the way they were, and rearranged the furniture, claiming it was so much cozier and more practical this way. One day Clara came home to find her favorite throw pillows from the sofa gone. In their place were new ones with hideous garish floral covers. Where are my pillows? She asked Sharon, who was busy cleaning the windows. Her mother-in-law turned her plump face a mask of sincere surprise, as if Clara were complaining about something trivial. Oh, those old things. She made a dismissive gesture. I got rid of them. They were so worn out and drab. I brought these from my house. They're so much prettier and more cheerful. See how they liven the place up. Clara stared at the pillows, which looked tacky and alien to her, and felt a lump form in her throat. The pillows Sharon had tossed were ones she and Ryan had bought together during their first month of living together. They had spent an hour picking them out, laughing and debating. Those pillows were a part of their history, a part of their home, and now they were gone. I like those pillows, Clara said, trying not to show how much it hurt. Could you please put them back? Sharon's lips tightened and a flicker of displeasure appeared in her eyes. Clara, honey, she said, in the tone one uses with a petulant child. You get too attached to old things. You have to know when to let go of the past and embrace the new. These pillows are much better, trust me. I have good taste. I know what I'm talking about. And she turned back to the window, making it clear the conversation was over. Clara stood in the middle of her living room, feeling completely powerless. It was her house, her things, but she could do nothing because Sharon was Ryan's mother and he always took her side. That night, she tried to talk to her husband again, but he just brushed her off. He said his mother was only trying to help, that she did it out of love, that Clara should be grateful instead of making a scene over some pillows. It's not about the pillows, Clara finally shouted, tears streaming down her cheeks, unable to hold them back any longer. It's about the fact that I feel like a stranger in my own home. Your mother moves my things, cooks in my kitchen, changes everything to her taste, and I can't say a word because you always take her side. You're just being ungrateful. Ryan replied coldly, and in his eyes she saw such profound disappointment that her heart seized. Mom is trying to make our home cozy. She cares about us, and all you see is the negative. What if the problem really is you? After that conversation, Clara stopped complaining. She watched in silence as Sharon transformed her apartment into something foreign and unwelcoming. Her mother-in-law brought over her own pots and pans, declaring Clara's to be useless. She replaced the bedroom curtains with something more decent, as she put it. She even rearranged the books on the shelves, organizing them by spine color instead of the system Clara had. Jessica continued to come over every day, now acting even more brazenly, feeling her mother's full support. She ate whatever she wanted from the fridge without asking. She monopolized the bathroom for hours. She left her belongings strewn across the floor. Once Clara found her favorite sweater in the washing machine with Jessica's clothes. The girl had simply taken it from her closet and washed it with her own things without a second thought. Clara felt that with each passing day her home became more alien, that she herself was becoming a guest who was tolerated but whose opinion mattered to no one. She would come home from work never knowing what she would find. Maybe Sharon had rearranged something else, or Jessica had brought friends over, or they had done a deep clean together and thrown out something unnecessary. In the evenings, Ryan would thank his mother for her care, praise her cooking, and admire how clean and cozy their home had become. He didn't see what Clara saw. He didn't see how she shrank inside every time she opened her front door, feeling like an unwanted guest. For him, everything was perfect. His mother and sister were close. His wife was under the same roof with them. His family was united. The fact that Clara was suffocating in this closeness, losing herself in a house that was no longer her fortress, didn't matter to him. And Clara knew something had to change. She couldn't live like this anymore. She couldn't come home every day to a place that had become an extension of Sharon's house. A decision was forming inside her, still vague and terrifying but growing clearer with each day. She had to get her home back at any cost. On Wednesday, Clara felt sick from the moment she woke up. Her head was pounding as if someone were methodically hammering inside her skull, and a sharp pain pulsed in her temples, blurring her vision. She made it through the morning, but by noon she couldn't take it anymore and asked her boss if she could leave early, promising to finish her reports from home. Her boss, seeing her pale face and the dark circles under her eyes, agreed immediately and advised her to have some tea with honey and get some sleep. Clara rode the bus with her forehead pressed against the cool glass, thinking only of getting home, taking a painkiller, drawing the bedroom curtains and crawling under the covers in the dark and quiet. She craved silence, that absolute vibrating silence, so she could just lie there and think of nothing, feel nothing except the pain slowly fading away. But when she got to her floor and heard the music behind her door, a heavy bass vibrating through the walls, her heart sank. A bitter taste filled her mouth, a premonition that something was terribly wrong. She unlocked the door, and the sight that met her eyes rooted her to the spot, unable to believe what she was seeing. There were at least 10 people in her apartment, maybe more. Young men and women were sitting on the sofa, on the floor, on the windowsills, holding plastic cups filled with something clearly alcoholic, judging by the sweet, pungent smell that hit her nostrils. Music blared from a speaker someone had brought and placed on her coffee table. The table was now covered in bottles, chip bags, and an ashtray overflowing with cigarette butts. In the kitchen, someone was rummaging through her refrigerator, pulling out her food and arranging it on plates. There was trash everywhere, crumbs, spilled drinks, staining the rug. And in the middle of this chaos stood Jessica, wearing a short dress and holding a wine glass. She was laughing at something one of the guys was saying, looking completely happy and carefree, as if this were her own party in her own home. What is going on here? Clara shouted, her voice so loud and sharp that several people flinched. For a second, the music even seemed to quiet down. Jessica turned her face, showing a mix of irritation and slight embarrassment, but she quickly composed herself and plastered on a smile. "Oh hey," she said, without a hint of remorse, only mild annoyance at the interruption. "You're home early. We thought you'd be at work until this evening." Clara felt something inside her snap like a rope stretched to its breaking point. The music and shouting intensified her headache. Her temples throbbed so hard she wanted to cover her ears and scream. "Turn off the music," she commanded. There was such steel in her voice that one of the guys nearest the speaker instinctively reached out and killed the sound. In the ensuing silence, someone coughed awkwardly. A chip bag rustled. Everyone was staring at Clara, their eyes filled with confusion as if she were the one behaving inappropriately, not them. "I am asking," Clara said, her eyes slowly scanning the room, "what all of you are doing in my apartment. Who gave you permission to be here?" Jessica set her glass down on the table and took a step toward Clara, her face now a mask of offense and indignation. "Hey, don't make a scene," she said, using the tone one reserves for a misbehaving child. "It's my friend's birthday. We wanted to celebrate somewhere decent, not some cheap dive bar. I figured you wouldn't mind since you weren't home." "You figured I wouldn't mind?" Clara felt hot, furious tears streamed down her cheeks, and she didn't care that these strangers saw her cry. "You brought a crowd of people I don't even know into my home. You threw a party, trashed everything, and you thought I wouldn't mind. Do you have any shred of respect for other people's space?" One of the girls on the sofa stood up and uncertainly reached for her purse, clearly sensing the atmosphere had become explosive. Several others did the same, casting guilty glances at Clara and hastily collecting their things. "Hey, we should probably go," one of the guys muttered, making his way toward the door. "Sorry for the trouble." Jessica shot him a furious look, but he had already slipped out and the others followed. Within a couple of minutes, only Clara and Jessica were left in the apartment, facing each other like two fighters before a match. "You ruined everything," Jessica shrieked, her face contorted with rage. "We were just starting to have fun, and you come in and have a meltdown. Why can't you just be normal and let people relax?" Clara walked slowly toward her, and there was something in her gaze that made the other girl take an involuntary step back. "Get out," Clara said, her voice low but so thick with fury it sounded more terrifying than any scream. "Get out of my house right now. And don't ever come back." "You can't order me around." Jessica tried to maintain her bravado, but her voice trembled. "Ryan is going to hear about this. Mom is going to hear about this. They are not going to let you treat me this way." "I don't care." Clara cut her off. "Get out." Jessica snatched her purse. Her lips were trembling and tears of humiliation and offense welled in her eyes. "You're going to regret this," she hissed as she brushed past Clara toward the door. "I'm going to tell Mom everything, and she'll teach you how to talk to people in our family." The door slammed shut with such force that the windows rattled. Clara stood alone in the middle of her wrecked apartment, and only then did she allow herself to collapse onto the floor right where she was. She clutched her head in her hands and began to sob loud, wrenching sobs the kind she hadn't cried in years. The tears kept coming, and with them poured out all the pain, all the humiliation, all the powerlessness of the past few weeks. She didn't know how long she sat there, but when the tears finally ran out, night had fallen. Clara stood up, wiped her face on her sleeve, and started to clean. She picked up empty cups, scrubbed stains from the rug, threw away cigarette butts, washed dishes. And with every motion, a decision solidified inside her. This could not go on. The phone rang around 9 p.m. Clara saw Sharon's name on the screen and ignored it. The calls continued, first her mother-in-law, then Ryan, then Sharon again. Clara simply silenced her phone and kept cleaning. At 10, the doorbell rang. Clara looked through the peephole and saw Sharon, red with indignation, and Ryan standing beside her. She didn't open the door. She just backed away and returned to the kitchen. Sharon banged on the door, shouting something, demanding to be let in, but Clara had gone deaf. She washed the last pot, dried it carefully, and put it away. Half an hour later it was quiet. Clara went to the window and saw Sharon getting into Ryan's car, gesturing wildly, explaining something with vehemence. Ryan listened, his face grim. Clara knew he would be back, that there would be a scene, perhaps the worst one of their entire marriage, but she was ready. Because something inside her had changed that day. The submissive Clara, the one who tried to please everyone, was gone. In her place was a woman who would no longer tolerate being humiliated in her own home. She went to the bedroom, took a lawyer's business card from her nightstand, one she picked up months ago at a property rights seminar, and stared at it for a long time. Then she opened her laptop and started searching for how quickly she could get the locks on her apartment changed. She also carefully reread the deed to her apartment, which she kept in a safe, making sure she remembered correctly. The sole owner was her Clara and no one else. When Ryan returned close to midnight, she knew exactly what she was going to do. Ryan burst into the apartment like a hurricane. His face was purple with rage, his eyes flashing. Clara was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea, outwardly calm, though inside everything trembled in anticipation of what was to come. She knew he would arrive like this, furious, accusing, defending his mother and sister. "Have you lost your mind?" he shouted, not even taking off his jacket, his voice so loud Clara was sure the neighbors could hear. "How dare you kick my sister out? She came to me in tears. She said you made a scene, in front of her friends, humiliated her, threw her out on the street, like a beggar." Clara slowly set her cup down and looked at him. There was such a cold calm in her gaze that Ryan fell silent for a moment, bewildered. "Your sister threw a party in my apartment without my permission," she said, her voice quiet but perfectly clear. "She brought 10 people I don't know in here. They were drinking, smoking, and trashing the place. When I came home early from work with a splitting headache, I walked into chaos, noise, and people acting like they owned it." So what? Ryan took a step toward her, his fists clenched, the veins in his neck bulging. "They're young, they need a place to have fun. You could have just gone to the bedroom and closed the door if the noise bothered you. But no, you decided to throw a fit and embarrass my sister in front of her friends. This is my house, Ryan." Clara stood up from the table. Though she was a head shorter than her husband in that moment, she seemed to look down on him. "Mine. Not your sister's. Not your mother's. Mine. And I am not obligated to tolerate things here that make me uncomfortable." He stared at her as if seeing her for the first time, as if he didn't recognize this woman, with her chin held high and her gaze steady. "Our house," he growled. "I'm your husband, so it's our house, and my family has a right to be here." "Your family can be here as guests," Clara cut in. "Guests who are invited, who call ahead, who behave politely and respect the homeowners. Not like what's been happening." Just then Ryan's phone rang. He yanked it from his pocket, and Clara saw his mother's name on the screen. Ryan answered without taking his furious eyes off his wife. "Yeah, Mom, I'm home," he said, his voice trembling with contained rage. "I'm talking to her now." "Yes, I'll explain everything, don't worry." He hung up and fixed his glare on Clara again. "Mom wants to come over tomorrow morning to talk to you," he said, his tone a clear threat. "To explain to you how you're supposed to behave with members of our family. You're going to listen to her, and you are going to apologize to my sister." Clara shook her head, a cold, mirthless smile touching her lips. "No, Ryan. Your mother isn't coming over tomorrow. Because tomorrow I'm changing the locks." A silence so thick you could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall descended. Ryan stared at his wife, his mouth agape, not believing what he'd just heard. What he finally managed. "What did you say?" "I said that tomorrow morning a locksmith is coming to change every lock on this apartment," Clara repeated with complete calm, as if discussing the dinner menu. "Your mother and your sister will no longer be able to enter this apartment without my permission." Ryan put his hands on his head, paced the kitchen, then spun back to face her. There was sheer shock in his eyes, as if Clara had just announced she was burning the house down. "You can't do that," he yelled, his voice cracking into a shriek. "That's my mother, my sister, my family. How dare you cut them off from our home?" "It is not our home," Clara said, and each word dropped into the silence like a stone in a pond. "It is my home. This apartment was bought with the money my father left me. It is registered in my name only. You didn't contribute a single dollar to it, Ryan. Not one." He froze. His face slowly drained of color and his lips trembled. You never told me that," he stammered, and for the first time in the entire argument a note of uncertainty entered his voice. "I thought. We're married. I thought it belonged to both of us. You thought you could dispose of my property as if it were your own," Clara interrupted. "You thought your mother could hand out keys to my apartment to whomever she pleased. You thought I would just silently put up with being pushed out of my own home. But you were wrong." Ryan's phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen. His mother. He held the phone to his ear with a trembling hand. "Mom," he started, but Sharon clearly cut him off because he fell silent, just nodding, his face growing more and more bewildered. "Yeah, Mom. I understand." "Okay." He lowered the phone and looked at Clara, and there was such pleading, such desperation in his eyes that for a moment she almost felt sorry for him. "Mom is asking you not to do it," he said quietly, almost begging. "She says she didn't mean to offend you, she was just trying to help, that my sister really needed a quiet place to stay. Clara, please don't change the locks. We can talk about it, we can agree, we can set rules. If it's that important to you." Clara looked at him and no longer saw her beloved husband but a mama's boy incapable of standing up for his wife, incapable of protecting her boundaries, incapable of saying no to his mother. And something inside her broke for good. "This is my house," she said quietly, with a finality so absolute that Ryan flinched. "And in here you are also a guest." He recoiled as if she'd slapped him, his face contorted. A rage mixed with pain exploded in his eyes. "I'm your husband," he yelled desperately. "How can you say I'm a guest in the house I've lived in for 3 years? You're the husband who in those 3 years not once defended me from your mother," Clara replied, her voice dropping even lower, which only made her words cut deeper. "Who let her run my apartment, move my things, hand out my keys? Who always took her side when I tried to explain how much it bothered me? Who is screaming at me now because I didn't let strangers throw a party in my house? They are my family." Ryan slammed his fist on the table. His eyes were bloodshot. "My mother, my sister, they are the most important people to me. And if you can't accept them, if you can't be tolerant and kind to them, then maybe you're not capable of being a wife." Clara nodded as if he had just confirmed something she already knew. "Then maybe I don't need to be your wife," she said simply. A heavy vibrating silence filled the room. Ryan stared at her with wide eyes, not believing she could say such a thing. "What are you talking about?" he whispered. "I'm talking about being tired." Clara leaned against the wall, suddenly feeling an exhaustion so profound she could barely stand. "Tired of fighting for my right to live peacefully in my own home. Tired of not being heard, not being respected, not being valued. Tired of feeling like a stranger where I'm supposed to feel safe." Ryan was silent. His lips moved, but no words came out. Then he turned and walked into the bedroom. Clara heard him open the closet, pull out a duffel bag and start throwing clothes into it. 10 minutes later he returned with a full bag. His face was like stone. "I'm going to my mother's," he said coldly. "I'll stay there until you come to your senses. Until you realize how horribly you're behaving." "Leave your keys on the counter," Clara said calmly. He shot her a look of such hatred that her body tensed. "This is my house too," he spat through his teeth. "And I'm not giving you my keys. They won't work tomorrow anyway." With the new locks, Clara shrugged. Ryan threw the keys on the floor with such force that they bounced with a metallic clatter against the wall. Then he stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Clara stood in the middle of the entryway listening as his footsteps faded down the stairs, and felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. She picked up the keys, placed them on a shelf, and went into the bedroom. That night was the first in many weeks that she slept soundly without anxious dreams, without the feeling that her home no longer belonged to her. The next morning she woke up early, had coffee, and called the locksmith, scheduling a visit for 11 a.m. Then she took all the apartment documents from the safe and reread them carefully once again, confirming that she remembered everything correctly. When the doorbell rang at 1030, she initially thought the locksmith was early, but looking through the peephole she saw Sharon and Jessica, both flushed and agitated. They had keys in their hands, clearly ready to let themselves in, but Clara, thinking ahead, had secured the chain lock from the inside. "Clara," Sharon screamed, banging on the door. "Open up immediately, we need to talk." But Clara silently backed away from the door and returned to the kitchen to finish her coffee. Let them scream. In an hour the locksmith would arrive, and those keys in their hands would become useless pieces of metal, and she, Clara, would finally have her home back. The locksmith arrived promptly at 11, an older man with kind eyes and a worn toolbox. Sharon and Jessica were still standing in front of the door. When Clara opened it to let him in, her mother-in-law tried to slip in behind him, but Clara simply shut the door in her face and turned the lock. Sharon's shriek was so loud that the locksmith flinched and gave the homeowner a questioning look. "Open this door right now, you have no right. This is my son's house. Don't pay them any mind," Clara said calmly to the locksmith, though her hands were trembling. "They're just neighbors. How long will it take to change the locks?" The man scratched the back of his neck, assessing the door. "About 40 minutes for both," he replied. "You've got a good door. We'll put in some reliable locks. No one's getting through these." Sharon continued to pound on the door for another 20 minutes, screaming, threatening, promising that Ryan would deal with her, that Clara would regret this, that their family would not tolerate such humiliation. Then all went quiet. Clara thought they had finally left. But after the locks were changed and the locksmith had gone, leaving her with a set of new shiny keys, Clara glanced out the window and saw Sharon on the sidewalk below. Her mother-in-law was talking to a neighbor from the 3rd floor, an elderly woman who loved to gossip and knew everything happening in the building before anyone else. Clara watched as Sharon gestured, wildly explaining something with vehemence, and the neighbor nodded her face, a picture of compassion. Then another woman joined them, then another, and soon a small group had gathered at the building's entrance. They listened to Sharon, shook their heads, and cast glances up at the windows of Clara's apartment. Clara stepped back from the window, a wave of shame and rage washing over her. Sharon was telling the neighbors her version of the story, painting Clara as a cruel, ungrateful daughter-in-law who had thrown her husband's own family out of the house. And the neighbors believed her because Sharon knew how to be convincing, how to play the part of the long-suffering mother wronged by her son's evil wife. That night the phone rang. Clara looked at the screen. Sharon. She declined the call, but a minute later it rang again. Then again. Then a text from Jessica arrived. "You're a selfish bitch. Mom cried all night, because of you. I hope you're happy with yourself." Clara blocked Jessica's number, but Sharon kept calling from different phones, sometimes from her work number, sometimes a relative's. When Clara stopped answering altogether, long accusatory texts filled with venom and insults began to arrive. "You're destroying our family," Sharon wrote. "Ryan is so unhappy. He walks around with a long face all day, he's not eating. You're killing my son with your cruelty. All the neighbors know what you're really like now," Jessica wrote. "Stingy, mean, ungrateful. Ryan is such a good man and you don't deserve him." Clara read these messages, and every word hit where it hurt most, leaving bruises on her soul. She knew she shouldn't read them, that she should delete them and forget, but she couldn't stop, as if she deserved this pain, as if she deserved to be insulted and blamed. On the third day, Sharon showed up at the building again. This time she brought a delegation with her, Ryan's aunts and cousins, all the women Clara had seen a couple of times at family parties. They stood under her windows and shouted, demanding that Clara come out and talk, accusing her of turning her husband against his own mother. "Come out, you coward," one of the aunts, a large woman with dyed red hair, bellowed. "You think you can just hide and this will all go away? We'll be here every day, until you understand what you've done." Neighbors came out onto their balconies, peeked through their windows, watching the spectacle, with a mixture of curiosity and disapproval. Clara saw them pointing at her, whispering, shaking their heads. She felt cornered, besieged, as if the whole world were against her. That night a text from Ryan arrived. The first in 3 days. Clara opened it with her heart pounding, hoping for a sign of remorse, a hint that he understood her side. But it was something else entirely. "You're going to regret what you did. You think you can throw me out of my home and get away with it? I'm going to sue for my share. We'll sell this apartment, and you'll only get half, maybe less, if my lawyer is good. You'll be left with nothing, and then you'll understand what it means to go against my family." Clara sat in her kitchen, holding the phone with trembling hands, rereading the message over and over. So that was it. Ryan wasn't just hurt, wasn't just waiting for her to come to her senses and apologize. He had decided to fight for the apartment, to take from her what she had bought with her father's money, the only thing she had left of him. She got up and went to the room where she kept the safe with her documents. She took out the deed, the sales contract, all the papers that proved the apartment belonged solely to her. Then she pulled out an old photograph. Her and her father. She was 15. They were hugging, smiling for the camera. Her father had died 2 years after that photo was taken, leaving her a small inheritance that was just enough to buy this apartment. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered, looking at the photo through tears. "I won't let them take what you left me. I promise." The next morning Clara took a day off from work and went to see a lawyer. The business card she had found days earlier led her to a small office in the city center, where she was greeted by a woman in her mid-40s, with intelligent, piercing eyes and a firm handshake. "Please have a seat," the lawyer said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. "Tell me everything." Clara told her everything, how Sharon handed out keys to the party, changing the locks, Ryan's threats. The lawyer listened attentively, taking notes, her face impassive. "Show me the documents for the apartment," she requested when Clara finished. Clara took out the folder and placed it on the desk. The lawyer reviewed each paper carefully, then looked up, a faint smile on her face. "You did very well to register everything in your name only," she said, with an approving tone. "The apartment was purchased with your personal funds received as an inheritance from your father before the marriage. By law, it is your separate property and is not subject to division in a divorce. Your husband has no claim to it unless you were to willingly gift him a share." Clara felt something inside her thaw, the icy fear that had gripped her chest for days beginning to loosen. "So he can't take half of it from me?" she asked, hardly believing it could be that simple. "He cannot," the lawyer confirmed. "Furthermore, if he is threatening you, sending you abusive messages, and his mother is making scenes in front of your home, all of that can be used as evidence in the divorce proceedings." "Did you save those messages?" Clara nodded. Good, the lawyer leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. I recommend you file for divorce as soon as possible. Don't wait for the situation to escalate. The sooner you start the process, the sooner you'll be out of this nightmare. And what if Clara hesitated, searching for the words? What if he tries to prove something, says he put money into renovations, into furniture? Then let him produce invoices, receipts, proof of bank transfers. The lawyer shrugged. But even if he did contribute something, that doesn't entitle him to a share of the apartment itself. At most he could claim compensation for improvements, and only if he can prove it with documentation. Clara left the office feeling like she was finally on solid ground after weeks of teetering on the edge of an abyss. She had a plan. She had rights. She had the law on her side. Ryan and Sharon could scream and threaten all they wanted, but they couldn't take her home from her. That same day she signed the retainer agreement with the lawyer to handle the divorce. When she put her signature on the documents, her hand didn't tremble. She thought about how 3 years ago she believed she was marrying for love, that Ryan was the man she would spend her life with. She didn't know then that he would never learn to be a husband, that his mother would always be more important than his wife, that he would never take her side. The petition will be filed tomorrow, the lawyer said, placing the papers in a folder. Prepare yourself for his family to try to pressure you. There will be calls, threats, perhaps attempts at intimidation. Don't give in. You have my support and you have the law. When Clara got home, Sharon and Jessica were already at the entrance. They rushed toward her, but Clara walked past them, ignoring their shouts, not responding to their accusations. She went up to her apartment, locked the door with the new locks for which they had no key, and for the first time in many days she felt safe. That night another message from Ryan arrived. Mom says you looked very pleased with yourself today. You must be happy you've destroyed our family. But you'll see what it's like to be alone. No husband, no family, no support. Clara read it and deleted it without replying. Then she blocked Ryan's number as well. She no longer needed to read those messages filled with bile and reproach. She had her life, her house, her rights, and she was going to fight for them until the end. A week had passed since she filed the petition, and Clara was trying to lead a normal life. She went to work, came home, cooked dinner for herself in the quiet calm of her kitchen. But the calm was deceptive, because inside she was always waiting for the next blow, some new loaf from Ryan and his family. And she was right. The blow came soon enough. The lawyer called her on Wednesday morning as Clara was getting ready for work, her voice laced with a tense seriousness that made Clara's heart lurch. We need to meet today, the lawyer said without preamble, as soon as possible. I found something interesting while reviewing the financial documents submitted by your husband's side. Something bad? Clara asked, the hand holding the phone beginning to tremble. Come to the office and we'll discuss it in person, the lawyer said evasively. Is 2 o'clock good for you? Clara got permission to leave work and arrived at the lawyer's office at 2 on the dot. The woman greeted her with a serious expression, showed her to a chair, and placed several documents in front of her. Your husband's attorney sent a list of expenses that he claims Ryan covered for the maintenance and improvement of the apartment. The lawyer began pointing to the papers. It includes amounts for repairs, furniture, and appliances. It's quite an impressive list. Clara felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. She looked at the figures and her blood ran cold. There were tens of thousands of dollars supposedly spent by Ryan on the home. But that's not true, she whispered, tracing the lines with her finger. The major repairs were done before we were married. I paid for everything. I bought the furniture too. I have all the receipts. He barely contributed anything, a few minor things at most. The lawyer nodded, a strange predatory smile appearing on her face. That's what I thought, she said, leaning back. Which is why I carefully reviewed all the receipts he attached as proof. And you know what I found? Most of these receipts are either forgeries or they correspond to other properties. I found 3 invoices for construction work dated from a time when you weren't even married. And there's something even more interesting. She opened a desk drawer, pulled out another folder, and extracted several printouts of bank statements. I subpoenaed his bank records for the last 3 years, the lawyer continued, her voice growing taut. It's standard procedure in a divorce. And I found something I believe you don't know about. Clara looked at the papers, not understanding the numbers, dates, bank names. What is this? She asked quietly, her mouth dry with fear. It's a loan in your name taken out 1.5 years ago. The lawyer pointed to a line with her finger. What's important is that you never applied for this loan, did you? Clara shook her head, feeling the floor drop out from under her. A loan in her name. She had never taken out a loan in her life, let alone signed any documents. I reviewed the signature on the contract, the lawyer said, sliding another document toward her. It's not your signature. It's close, but it's clearly forged. Someone used your personal information and applied for a loan in your name. Ryan. Clara breathed a chill of horror and revulsion spreading through her. Ryan did it. He had access to my papers, he knew all my information. Exactly, the lawyer nodded. And what's interesting is that the money was transferred directly to his personal account. I checked the transactions. He took out a loan in your name, received the money, and spent it on himself. And you were the one legally obligated to pay it back. Clara sat in stunned silence, processing the information. A rage unlike anything she had ever felt before began to rise within her. Ryan hadn't just refused to protect her from his mother. He hadn't just allowed his relatives to take over her home. He had stolen from her, forged her signature, and used her as a source of cash to spend as he pleased without her knowledge. This is fraud, the lawyer said grimly. A criminal offense. You can file a police report. He could face actual jail time. I want to do it. Clara looked up and a fire burned in her eyes so intensely that the lawyer almost recoiled. I want him to answer for this. For all of it. That night Clara went through old photos, letters, everything that reminded her of her life with Ryan. She looked at their wedding pictures where they both smiled at the camera holding hands, and she couldn't believe the man she married was capable of such depravity. Had he planned this from the beginning, or did the decision to use her come later when he realized she wouldn't resist, that they could do whatever they wanted with her? The phone rang, showing an unknown number. Normally, she wouldn't answer, but something compelled her to pick up. Clara. A hesitant female voice. At first, Clara didn't recognize her, but then it clicked. It's Isabel. Do you remember me? From college? Isabel, of course. Clara sat up, surprised by the unexpected call. It's been forever. How are you? Look, I'm calling because... Isabel hesitated, her voice filled with discomfort. I feel awkward about this, but I thought you should know. I ran into your husband's sister recently. We were at the same coffee shop. She was with her friends. And I overheard them talking. Well, they were talking about you. Clara tensed, gripping the phone so hard her knuckles turned white. What were they saying? She asked softly. Your sister-in-law was bragging, Isabel said quickly, as if wanting to get it over with. She was saying that soon, she'd be living downtown in a gorgeous apartment, that her mom had it all planned out perfectly, that they just had to keep up the pressure a little longer and you would leave on your own, unable to take it. That the apartment would then go to Ryan, and he would let his family have it. Clara closed her eyes and images from the past few months flashed before her. Sharon relentlessly changing everything, Jessica acting more and more brazenly, both of them doing everything possible to drive her out of her own home. It wasn't just a lack of tact or boundaries. It was a plan. Sharon was deliberately making Clara's life a living hell so she would run away, so she would divorce Ryan and leave the apartment behind. Thank you for calling, Clara said, her voice sounding strangely calm. That's very important information, Clara. I'm so sorry. Isabel's voice was filled with sincere compassion. If you need anything, call me. I'm willing to testify if you need it. I heard what she said. After the call, Clara sat in the dark for a long time, digesting what she'd heard. So this whole time she had been nothing but a pawn in someone else's game. Sharon wanted the apartment for her daughter and had used her son to gain access to it. Ryan. Maybe he didn't even fully understand what was happening, just obeying his mother as he had his whole life. Or maybe he did understand, maybe he was in on it with them. Maybe he had married Clara specifically for the apartment. Clara got up and went to the window. The streetlights glowed below, a few cars passing by. The city went on with its normal life, and somewhere in another neighborhood, Sharon and her daughter were likely sitting and scheming, planning how to get what didn't belong to them. Ryan was probably there too, complaining to his mother about the cruel wife who didn't appreciate their care. The next day Clara met with her lawyer again and told her about Isabel's call. The lawyer documented everything and asked for her friend's contact information to take a formal statement. This changes the case, the lawyer said as she wrote. Now we can demonstrate that there was deliberate psychological pressure from your husband's family with the intent to misappropriate your property. This significantly strengthens your position. I want them to answer for everything, Clara said, looking at her lawyer firmly. For the loan fraud, for the attempt to take my apartment, for all the humiliation I endured. I don't just want to get divorced and forget it. I want justice. The lawyer nodded, a grim determination on her face. Then we'll go all the way, she said. We will gather all the evidence, all the testimonies, prepare the paperwork for the police regarding the fraud, and in court we will present the full picture of what they have done to you." Clara left the office feeling like everything had finally clicked into place. She no longer felt like a victim, a helpless woman who had been used and betrayed. Now she knew the truth, and that truth gave her strength. She had evidence, she had witnesses, she had the law on her side. That night she printed out all the bank statements, all the texts from Ryan and his family, all the documents that could be used in court. She organized them into binders, labeled each one, created an inventory. It was her armor, her protection, her weapon for the battle to come. And when she went to bed that night, for the first time in a long time, she felt no fear, only a cold determination to see this through to the end and show Ryan, Sharon, and their entire family that she was not to be trifled with. She would not break, she would not back down, and she would not let them steal what her father had left her. They had started this war thinking she was weak and docile. Now they were about to see what a woman pushed to her limit was capable of. The court hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. Clara woke up at 6, even though her alarm was set for 7. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling a strange calm, the kind you feel before the most important exam of your life, when you've studied everything and you know you're prepared. She had all the documents, all the evidence, Isabel's notarized statement. The truth was on her side, and that gave her strength. She put on a navy blue pantsuit she'd bought specifically for this day. She pulled her hair back into a neat bun, applied subtle makeup that made her look like a confident, self-possessed woman, not a victim. Looking in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The scared, cornered Clara who had hidden from her mother-in-law in her own apartment was gone. In her place was another woman with a straight back and a steady gaze. She arrived at the courthouse half an hour early. Her lawyer was already waiting in the lobby and gave her an approving nod. "You look great," she said, shaking her hand. Confident, dignified. That's how it should be. They went up to the 3rd floor. When Clara pushed open the heavy courtroom door, the first person she saw was Ryan. He was sitting on the opposite bench with an expensive suited man, clearly his lawyer. He looked worn out, older, as if the weeks of separation had settled on him like a heavy weight. Beside him sat Sharon in a black dress that was apparently meant to look funereal, and just beyond her was Jessica, pale and furious. When Ryan saw Clara, his face tightened, and for an instant, something akin to pain flickered in his eyes. But he quickly looked away, clenching his jaw until the muscles stood out. Sharon, however, glared at her with such contempt and hatred that if looks could kill, Clara would have dropped dead on the threshold. The judge entered at 10 o'clock sharp, a woman in her 50s with a tired face and stern eyes who had clearly seen too many cases like this to have any illusions about human nature. She took her seat, put on her glasses, and opened the file. "The court is now in session for the divorce proceedings between Clara Hayes and Ryan Miller," she announced in a flat voice, "as well as the property disputes related to this matter. Let's begin with the petition for the division of assets." Ryan's lawyer stood up first. Clara listened as he argued that his client had invested significant sums in the apartment and was entitled to half, that Clara was acting unjustly by depriving her husband of his legal share. The lawyer's voice was confident and convincing, and Clara saw the judge taking notes, her brow furrowed as she reviewed the submitted documents. Then Clara's lawyer stood, and her voice was clear and cold like the edge of a knife. "Your Honor, the apartment in question was acquired by my client prior to the marriage using personal funds from the inheritance of her late father," she began, each word landing with weight and firmness in the silent courtroom. "We have all the documentation to prove this: the certificate of inheritance, the purchase contract, bank statements showing the transfer of funds. Mr. Miller has no legal claim to this property whatsoever." She placed a stack of documents on the judge's bench, and the judge began to review them carefully. Ryan shifted in his seat. His lawyer whispered something urgently in his ear. Sharon clutched her purse so tightly her knuckles went white. "Regarding Mr. Miller's claims of investing in renovations and improvements," Clara's lawyer continued, "the receipts provided either do not correspond to this property or are dated from before the marriage, when Mr. Miller had no connection to the residence." The judge looked up, her gaze sharp. "Mr. Miller," she addressed Ryan, "can you provide credible proof of your financial investments in this apartment? Bank statements, receipts, invoices with the correct dates." Ryan stood. Clara saw him swallow hard, his hands trembling. I didn't keep all the receipts," he mumbled, his voice weak and almost pitiful. "But I really did pay for repairs. I bought things for the house. My wife knows it, she can't deny it." "I don't deny that you bought some minor items," Clara said calmly, her voice firm and clear, "but they were insignificant purchases that do not entitle you to a share of the apartment. I paid for everything else, and I have all the proof." At that moment, Clara's lawyer produced another folder and placed it before the judge. Your Honor, there is one more highly relevant matter, she said, her voice now like ice. We have discovered that a year and a half ago a loan was taken out in my client's name, of which she had no knowledge. The signature on the documents is a forgery. The funds from that loan were transferred to Mr. Miller's personal bank account. A dead silence fell over the courtroom. You could hear someone's heavy breathing. Ryan went pale, his face turning a ghastly shade of gray. Sharon leaped to her feet, her eyes burning with a feverish glint. That's a lie, she shrieked, her voice so shrill the judge winced. Clara is making it all up to slander my son. She's a vindictive evil woman who wants to leave him with nothing. Silence in the court. The judge slammed her gavel, her gaze freezing. Ma'am, I'm asking you to sit down and not interfere, or I will have you removed from the room. Sharon sat back down, her lips trembling, her eyes shooting daggers at Clara. Jessica put an arm around her mother, whispering something to calm her down. The judge took the documents from Clara's lawyer and examined them for a long time. Then she looked up, her gaze fixed on Ryan without a shred of compassion. Mr. Miller, do you acknowledge taking out a loan in your wife's name without her knowledge? She asked harshly. Ryan was silent. His lawyer whispered frantically to him, but Ryan just shook his head. He looked so wretched that Clara almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I needed the money, he finally admitted, his voice breaking. I wanted to help my sister. She was in trouble, she needed a large sum urgently. I thought I would pay it back quickly, that Clara would never even know. But this is fraud, the judge said coldly. Forgery and illegal procurement of credit funds. It is a criminal offense. Sharon stood up again, her face now streaked with tears, holding her hands out to the judge as if begging for mercy. Your Honor, please, her voice trembled, breaking into sobs. He's a good boy. He just wanted to help his family. Is it a crime to help your loved ones? Clara is cruel, she has no heart. She threw us out of the house, changed the locks, humiliated us, and all we wanted was to be close to our son. Ma'am, this is your final warning. The judge slammed the gavel again. One more outburst, and you will be removed. The hearing continued for another hour. Isabel's testimony was read, recounting what she had overheard Jessica say at the coffee shop. All the threatening, insulting, and coercive messages from Ryan, Sharon, and Jessica were reviewed. The financial documents, bank statements, and proof of Clara's sole ownership of the apartment were verified. Finally, the judge called for a recess to deliberate. Clara walked out into the hallway, her legs trembling, her throat so dry she could barely swallow. Her lawyer bought her a water from a vending machine, and they stood by the window in silence, looking down at the street below. You did very well, the lawyer said quietly. You remained dignified. I'm confident the ruling will be in your favor. Half an hour later they were called back into the courtroom. The judge sat with an impenetrable expression, several pages of notes in front of her. Having reviewed all the evidence and heard testimony from the parties and witnesses, the court issues the following ruling. She began in a formal, even tone. The marriage between Clara Hayes and Ryan Miller is hereby dissolved. The apartment located at 23 Liberty Street, Apartment 4B, is the separate property of Clara Hayes, acquired with inherited funds prior to the marriage, and is not subject to division. Mr. Miller has no claim whatsoever to said property. Ryan's head dropped, his shoulders slumped. Sharon burst into tears, covering her face with a handkerchief. Furthermore, the judge continued, her voice hardening, in light of the fraud that has been uncovered, Mr. Miller is ordered to repay within 6 months the entirety of the loan illegally obtained in Clara Hayes' name, as well as any accrued interest. The findings related to this fraud will be referred to the district attorney's office for the opening of a criminal investigation. Ryan's head snapped up, his eyes wide with a terror that suggested he was only now grasping the full consequences. Your Honor, I'll pay the money back. I'll do anything, he stammered desperately. Just, please, no criminal charges. The ruling is final and not subject to appeal. The judge cut him off. This court is adjourned. She slammed the gavel, gathered her papers, and walked out. Clara sat frozen in her chair, unable to move, feeling tears stream down her cheeks. But they weren't tears of sorrow, they were tears of relief, of liberation, of victory. She had won. Justice had prevailed. Ryan stood up slowly and walked toward the exit without looking at her, hunched and aged. Sharon and Jessica scrambled after him, their sobs echoing in the now nearly empty courtroom. Clara's lawyer put an arm around her shoulders. It's over, she said softly. You're free. The next day Clara went to the police station and filed a formal complaint against Ryan for fraud. The detective, a middle-aged man with a weary face, took the documents, reviewed them carefully, and nodded. This is straightforward, he said. We'll open a case and summon your ex-husband for questioning. Are you willing to testify? Yes, Clara replied firmly. A week passed after the trial, and Clara finally began to feel her life returning to normal. She rearranged the furniture in her apartment, putting everything back the way it was before Sharon's invasion. She bought new throw pillows to replace the ones her ex-mother-in-law had tossed. She hung a photo of her father on the wall, and every night, she would thank him for the inheritance he left her for the apartment that had become her fortress. On Friday evening, there was a knock at her door. Clara looked through the peephole and saw Sharon and Jessica. They both looked worn out, disheveled, their former haughty confidence gone. Sharon called, her voice pleading and pitiful. Please open the door. We need to talk. Clara didn't open it. She just leaned her back against the door and listened. Clara, honey, Sharon continued, her voice now thick with tears. I understand we were wrong. We didn't mean to hurt you, we just wanted to be closer to Ryan. I love my son. That's natural, isn't it? Let's forget everything that happened. Let's start over. Clara smiled wryly. How predictable. Now that the court had ruled and it was clear the apartment would never be theirs, they came begging for forgiveness. I need a place to live, Jessica cut in, her tone resentful. The renovations at my place still aren't done, and on top of that my boyfriend and I broke up. Clara, you understand how hard that is. Just let me stay with you for a couple of months until I find my own place. I'll help around the house, I'll cook, clean, whatever you want. Clara silently pushed herself away from the door and walked back to the kitchen. Sharon and Jessica knocked and called for another 10 minutes. Then it was quiet. When Clara looked through the peephole again, they were gone. Later that night, Ryan called. Clara saw his name on the screen and wanted to hang up, but curiosity got the better of her. She answered and heard his drunken, slurring, whining voice. Clara Bear, he stammered, running his words together. Let's get back together. I love you. I miss you. It's awful at Mom's house. She yells all the time. Says everything is my fault. Clara listened to this drunken confession and felt nothing but cold indifference. This man was a stranger to her now, as if the Ryan she married had never existed. Forgive me, he whimpered. She could hear sounds like crying through the phone. Forgive me for everything. I was an idiot. Mom said you would forgive me. That we could. That the apartment. Clara ended the call without hearing the rest. Then she went into her phone settings and blocked his number forever. She walked out onto her small balcony, opened the window and breathed in the cool night air. Below, the windows of other apartments glowed, filled with people living their own lives with their own joys and sorrows. Somewhere someone was cooking dinner, in another children were laughing, in another music was playing. Life went on, and Clara was a part of it, but now a free part, unshackled from the chains of other people's demands and expectations. She went back inside, poured herself a cup of tea, and sat on the sofa, the same sofa where Jessica and her friends had once sprawled. She opened her laptop. On the screen was the website of a travel agency. Clara had long dreamed of going to the ocean, of spending a week in a small coastal town, walking on the beach at sunrise and listening to the sound of the waves. Now, with the divorce finalized and the apartment definitively hers, she could afford it. She picked the dates, booked a hotel, and bought the plane tickets. And when the confirmation popped up on the screen, Clara smiled. For the first time in many months, she smiled, a real, genuine, wholehearted smile. She was free. Her home was hers again. And ahead of her lay a whole life full of possibilities that she could now choose for herself without looking over her shoulder at the opinions and desires of others. Sharon, Ryan, Jessica, they were all in the past, like a bad dream from which she had finally woken up. She finished her tea, closed the laptop, and went to sleep in her bedroom in her apartment in her home. And that night she slept deeply and peacefully, without nightmares, without anxiety, because she knew the battle was over, and she had won.